in process, and then again it raises many questions. The post-colonialism definitions and dangers. We are trying to define post-colonialism. We are trying to look at why it is dangerous to define post-colonialism, because it's not that very simple, it's not that very straight, and then it is loaded with multiple layers of meanings and complexities. So it's not that very easy. So now, what is the danger of defining post-colonialism? We have already seen what is post-colonialism. It's actually a mode of representation. That is how we have been. That is, people in the colonies, the ex-colonies, have been defined, labeled, and made to be seen by the West. How the West has always seen. For instance, please remember Said's Orientalism. It's a mode of representation. We have already seen how language is a powerful tool, how language has been made a powerful tool in representing people living in the colonies, and how they have been labeled in a particular manner. So, what has happened to the people in the colonies? They have internalized these things. So, since generations, since years, they have been told again and again that they are no good, that they are not refined enough, they are not. You could say human enough, they need to be rescued, they need to be civilized, educated. The whole process has been going on for such a long time that people had started believing that they are like that, that is the people in the colonies. And another thing we need to remember is this colonialism, it did not stop with the withdrawal of the colonizer officially. Officially, we became free on 15th August 1947. And then we got our own flag, we had our own minister, our own cabinet, everything. But then that particular day, that one fine morning or that overnight, these things, the trappings of colonialism, the colonial values, they don't disappear. And it is an ongoing process. It's not that you put a full stop and they signed the pact, the pact between the Britishers and the Indians, that Britishers have stopped and they are handing over the power to Nehru and his group of ministers. With that, all the trappings of colonialism did not disappear overnight. And that's one thing we need to keep in mind. And then there's this very interesting essay by Stuart Hall, wherein the title itself is a question. It's asking, when was the post-colonial thinking at the limit? So where's that point, or where is that point in time, point in history, wherein we can say that colonialism ended here and post-colonialism began from here? Is there an exact point from where you can say that it is from here that we have post-colonialism? Is it possible? That's what he is asking. So life after independence, it's characterized by the persistence, that is continuing of many of the effects of colonization. That is, even after independence, even after so many years, we still have many colonial vestiges in our society, in our legality, in different aspects of life. For instance, we are talking about, in the Indian context, Indian Penal Code. It might interest you to know that many of the rules, many of the, even you talk about the laws on sedition, as in anti-national activities and things like that, all these have actually origins in the British rule. The Britishers were using these very rules to suppress the Indian freedom movement. And right now, what are we doing? The ministers, the current government, they are using it against their own people to stop dissents. They're trying to silence people who speak about against them. So the colonial effect is still continuing. Even you talk about there were these rules and articles against homosexuality. It became decriminalized only recently. But then many of these rules, many of these you could say legal points, they are very draconian as in very old. And when you look at history, you understand that these are all been actually straight away lifted from the rules that Britishers had when they were ruling India. So the effects of colonization, it still continues to be there. So colonialism's representation, reading practices, and values that we have ingested and we have made it our own are not that easily dislodged. It's not very easy to let go, forget, and then start afresh. It's not that we get freedom and then we become free one particular day. I need to pause here a while, okay? All right. So, whatever we have learned or ingested during colonial period, it has not gone away from the collective psyche of our society. It's still there. And and can we really speak about a post-colonial experience, a post-colonial era, as if all these colonialisms, different assumptions, understandings, and opinions, they're all gone? And many of these things even today they remain unchallenged. It continues even today. So can we really speak about a post-colonial era? That's what the writer is asking. So what is post-colonialism? We already know that it is actually a challenge to the colonial ways of knowing, understanding, and one of the method is by writing back, wherein you're making use of the language of the colonizer to oppose rules or the kind of views they put on us. So it's kind of a revenge time wherein we are answering back, we are writing back to the center. So the challenge is there. The challenge is there. But in spite of the challenges, the colonial ways, the colonial mindset, the colonial vestiges, they still exist. And according to Carol Boyce Davis, she says that we need to remember one thing, that numerous peoples, it's not just one people, different groups, different ethnicities, different nationalities, the numerous peoples, they still exist. They exist in a colonial relationship around the world, as well as those people within certain nations who have been colonized with the former colonies. For instance, Native Americans, African Americans, South Africans, Palestinians, Aboriginal Australians, all these people, they continue to experience colonialism even today. We have already seen these are all examples of the settler colonies. So the settler colonies, as in wherein hordes of white people they went and settled there. Kudiyattakar, so there's that white version of a settlement. So what are these people doing to the native people there? The Native Americans, the African Americans, South Africans, and in Palestine also we know what is happening. So what is happening to all these people? So even today they are living the colonial experience. You can call it the neo-colonial experience. So is it really post-colonial? So there is this issue of internal colonialism. That internal colonialism continues even in free countries today. Free country, as in South Africa is a free country, then America is a free country. Within America, you have the condition of African Americans, and then Native Americans. What about them? So these people they still continue to experience colonialism. So where is post-colonialism? Or can we really define post-colonialism? So have we really arrived at post-colonialism? That's the question. So what exactly is post-colonialism? So it does not mean after colonialism. So post-colonialism does not mean after colonialism. Why? Because we have not yet reached after colonialism. Because when you look at the whole map of the world together, we still haven't reached that point where in every country, every group, every race, every gender has become post-colonial. It has not happened that way. So it does not define a radically new historical era. It's not like, it's a bright new morning and it's a brave new world. We have not yet reached there. So post-colonialism essentially means two things. What are they? One is historical continuity and the other one is change. So look at these two terms, they are actually contradictory. They are kind of contradictory. You're talking about continuity and you're talking about change. Now, what is continuity? The same thing. The same thing. Continuity is something same, whereas change is the opposite of continuity or change. So, what is the same? The material realities, modes of representation, the way things were in colonies, it's still the same. So it represents the same thing. The political map of the world has changed. The political map has changed. You have all these countries becoming free. Now you cannot draw the map of Great Britain with Britain as the center and all these colonies as part of it. If you have taken a look at the college LMS that for post-colonialism, the cover page is the map of the world. When under the British rule, that's a cover page. So that was the map once upon a time, the political map. But today's world, the map has drastically changed. So you have India as an independent country. It's no more a colony. Right. So though the map has changed, the material reality, the way of even today we have the kind of differences, the kind of strife that was there during the Britishers' time, even today. You talk about caste discrimination, you have these Dalits and you have that inequality. It was there, it is there even today. So that continuity is very much there. So the ground reality is it has not changed, but what has changed, the promise, the possibility and the continuing necessity, that is the need to understand that important challenges and changes have already been achieved, like we have become independent, we have become self-reliant, we become confident. The most important battle has been fought and won. The most important thing has been fought and won. We have our own flag. We have become a sovereign republic. So no other country can interfere in what we do with ourselves, our policies and regulations. Fine. So in that way, there is change. But then still we continue with many of the material realities and modes of representation as it was there during the colonial period. So post-colonialism is actually a very contradictory kind of a term. So, how do we define this post-colonialism? So, according to the writer, we need to mainly talk about the reading practices of text generated from colonial experience and from the colonies. So the way we look at the text and we try to understand, that is actually post-colonialism. So it's not that one particular moment in history wherein everyone became free and then they are defining themselves in terms of their own newfound identity. That is not the case. So what is post-colonialism? It refers to our reading practices. So the first one is, you can look at it from three perspectives. The one is reading text produced by writers from countries with a history of colonialism. So countries like India. So primarily those texts concerned with the workings on legacy of colonialism in either the past or the present. So you talk about Raja Rao's Kantapura, you talk about the guide, Mulk Rajanand. These are all explicitly colonial texts. So even today, when you take up, even you can talk about other writers. You talk about Chitra Divakarni Banerjee. You'll find lots of colonial underpinnings in their texts. So either the stories are set in the past or they are set in the present, but then it is essentially colonial. The second consists in reading texts produced by those that have migrated from countries with a history of post-colonialism, or those descended from migrant families, which deal in the main with diaspora experience and its many consequences. So you can talk about this very famous gentleman from um, the West Indies. Can you name him? Indian writer V.S. Naipaul. V.S. Naipaul is actually a descendant from migrant Indian families. May settle there is the second or the third generation. So the kind of work that these kind of writers write also fall under that. So you can put even Chitra Divakarani Banerjee here because she's migrated, though she was educated and all. Even we can talk about Baba himself, Homi Baba. He's a product of India, educated in Mumbai and all, right? So he can also fall under this. So reading text produced by these kind of writers with they have migrated, they've gone to other countries, they're teaching abroad, whatever, but then they have their roots in countries that have a history of post-colonialism. So you have writers like Jhumpa Lahiri, yes, Tishani Doshi. You can look it up. There are many upcoming writers also who belong to this category. And the final method is in the light of the theories of colonial discourses. That is, we have already looked at colonial discourses. I hope you remember Franz Fanon, Edward Said, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. So when you talk about these colonial discourses, what are they doing? What the method is to reread the texts produced during colonialism. So they were not directly dealing with the effects of colonialism, but then you're trying to look at the effects of colonialism in those texts. So both that those that directly address the experiences of empire and those that seem not to. So some texts are apparently on the surface clearly colonial, whereas some did not have anything to do with colonialism apparently, but then reading of it will give you an understanding. As in, again and again, we are taking that example of Heart of the Matter, Graham Greene. You can talk about Shakespeare's Tempest. They all are actually colonial texts. You know, that it's possible to have a colonial reading of these texts. So then finally problematizing post-colonialism. It's not that very easy to define it. Why? Because it's not possible to have a single manifesto exactly what is post-colonialism. You cannot have one rule or one size fits all because of the diversity and the heterogeneity that is written into the post-colonial experience. And there has to be this realization that how colonial discourses they function in particular ways for different people at different times. So the definition keeps changing. It means different things for different people at different times depending on the place they are coming from, the kind of nationality, the kind of gender, the kind of race that they belong to. So the whole field itself is quite variable. Variable as in it keeps changing. So you cannot have one definition, one term that defines post-colonialism. So though another important aspect is though the aim of post-colonialism is to oppose colonial representation, the question is does it really fulfill these aims? The main aim is to oppose colonial representation and values. Rewriting, writing back, and if you remember all those kind of things. So that is the main aim of post-colonialism, to oppose, to change, and to give a new identity. But then the question is, does it really fulfill these aims? So as a field, as an area of study, as an area of expertise, is post-colonialism doing all this? Are the writers seriously conscious, aware about these things? Are they really doing it? If they are doing it, why do we still have problems with this particular field? That is, we still have colonial hang-ups. We still have people who are not aware. So these are some of the questions that are put forward by the critics. That is, we have not really reached that point wherein we can say we are post colonial. So the basic understanding is post colonialism is actually a methodology of approaching text, reading text, looking for how the colonial past is recorded and what is the reaction and response to the colonial past, the colonial experience. Though we are talking about it in the past sense, we need to understand that many of these values, many of these assumptions and understandings still continue to be followed by people across cultures, across nationalities. So it is an evolving area, evolving field.